The Republicans sweep midterm races in the U.S., but President Obama is standing his ground. What happens next? And what does it tell us about the presidential race in 2016? Radio talk show host and Fox News contributor Laura Ingraham joins us with analysis. And now that Republicans control both houses of Congress, what will their agenda be? And is an immigration deal in the works? Congressman Jim Sensenbrenner of Wisconsin will tell us. And finally, Brittany Maynard, the terminally ill 29-year-old Oregon woman, ended her life. Some claim she has redefined the right to die issue. Has she? Father TAD PACHOLCZYK of the National Catholic Bioethics Center will discuss. The World Over begins right now.
Now, from Washington, D.C., Raymond Arroyo.
A warm welcome to all of you joining us in the United States and the world over. Laura Ingraham, Congressman Jim Sensenbrenner, and Father TAD PACHOLCZYK are all straight ahead. If you'd like to comment on tonight's show, send us a tweet. I'm at Raymond Arroyo. Or you can drop us an email at worldover@EWTN.com. We have a lot to cover. Here's the brief. News from the world over this week. Here in the United States, the Republican Party is celebrating its sweeping victory in Tuesday's midterm elections. The GOP seized control of the U.S. Senate with a pickup of at least 7 seats. Results in Alaska, Louisiana, and Virginia are still pending. The Republican majority currently stands at 52 to 45 and ends the Democrats' 8-year run controlling the Senate. The resurgent Republicans capitalized on Democrats hamstrung by an unpopular president, the millstone of Obamacare, and overall voter discontent. Republicans expanded their House majority by at least another 13 seats, their largest class since the 1940s. The Republican wave also led to gubernatorial victories in deep blue states, shocking Democrats in Illinois, Maryland, and Massachusetts. Tuesday night was also a night of historic firsts for Republicans in the federal elections. Among them, South Carolina's Tim Scott became the first African-American from the South elected to the Senate in either party since Reconstruction. Senators-elect Joni Ernst of Iowa and Shelley Moore Capito of West Virginia will be the first female senators from their states. West Virginia also elected its first Latino, Congressman-elect Alex Mooney. Utah's Mia Love became the GOP's first black woman elected to Congress, and 30-year-old Elise Stefanik of New York is the youngest woman ever elected to the Hill. After Tuesday's election, Congress for the first time will be comprised of more than 100 female lawmakers. More about the implications of the election and the reaction of congressional leaders and the White House in our segments with Laura Ingraham and Congressman Sensenbrenner straight ahead. Some ballot initiatives of note across the U.S. The minimum wage was raised in Alaska, South Dakota, Nebraska, Arkansas, as well as San Francisco and Oakland. In all, the new laws will affect some 600,000 wage earners. Marijuana was legalized in Alaska, Oregon, and here in the District of Columbia. Florida rejected a medical marijuana measure. Pro-life measures offering legal protection to the unborn were defeated in Colorado and North Dakota, while voters in Tennessee explicitly rejected any right to an abortion in their state constitution. In Oregon, voters there overwhelmingly defeated a measure to provide driver's licenses to illegal aliens. In other news, a suicide bomber killed at least 32 people on Monday near a Shiite Muslim religious procession in northeast Nigeria. 119 people were wounded in the attack. In a separate incident in central Nigeria, militants using explosives freed 145 inmates from a prison in the state of Kogi on Sunday. Prison officials said one inmate died in the attack and 12 escapees had been recaptured. Boko Haram is suspected in both attacks. And Muslims in Iraq are also falling victim to jihad. Government officials have confirmed the massacre of more than 300 members of a Sunni tribe by Islamic State militants. Among the dead in the western Anbar village, dozens of women and children were found at the bottom of a well. The tribe had battled ISIS for weeks before running low on ammunition and supplies. Calls for support from Iraqi government and international forces went unanswered, save for one U.S. airdrop. And disturbing news is emerging on the sex slave market of the Islamic State. Iraq News has obtained a purchase price list for Yazidi and Christian women and girls. The ISIS document, or the ISIS-issued document, sets prices based on age. The younger, the more expensive. Women 40 and 50 years of age cost the equivalent of $40 U.S. Girls ages 1 to 10 go for $175. The document notes that all proceeds will benefit the Mujahideen, or Holy Struggle of ISIS. Also emerging this week, an internet video of an apparent sex slave auction in Mosul. As rules of the auction are being explained, giddy young militants are seen joking about their purchases. One yells, "Where's my Yazidi girl?" as another exclaims, "If she doesn't have teeth, I wouldn't want her." Another then suggests dentures. The auctioneer notes, girls with blue eyes and green eyes cost more. Arabic language TV Al Ayan translated the video but could not independently verify its authenticity. And according to a new study, religious freedom is substantially curtailed in more than half of the world's nations, and restrictions on religious freedom are growing in more than 1/4 of all countries. Prepared by the Vatican-affiliated Aid to the Church in Need, the report found a high level of religious intolerance in 20 countries and the situation deteriorating in 55 others. Of the 20, 14 of those countries are Islamic states, including Iraq, Syria, and Nigeria. The report also notes a trend toward restrictions on religious freedom in the West. The report attributes this to a widespread belief that religious ideas should be barred from the public square and a fear of religious extremism. The rise of aggressive atheism and a religious illiteracy also contribute to threats against religious freedom. Back in the U.S., Brittany Maynard, the young California woman diagnosed with terminal brain cancer, ended her life on November 1st. She made national headlines for her intention to use Oregon's so-called Dying with Dignity law after moving there earlier this year. Advocates for doctor-assisted suicide hailed her decision and expressed hope that right-to-die laws would soon be passed in other states. Maynard worked with the advocacy group Compassion and Choices, which spends about $7 million annually to promote assisted suicide. More on the story and its moral implications later in the program. And Pope Francis called for a quicker annulment process this week. He also indicated he would consider doing away with church fees for declarations of nullity. An annulment is the legal process that Catholics must follow in order to marry again following a divorce. The Pope told participants at a Vatican meeting with marriage tribunal officials that he was dismayed when he learned of the hardships some of the faithful endure when going through the annulment process. He recounted how he once fired a tribunal official for taking a $10,000 fee for his services. Justice and charity were the Holy Father's words in arguing for the changes, saying that the process can be long and weighty, that people can become discouraged. Just 1 month after the controversial Synod on the Family wrapped in Rome, Pope Francis will convene an interreligious conference focused on traditional marriage. The 3-day Vatican-sponsored meeting entitled Complementarity of Man and Woman will kick off November 17th. The gathering will host over 30 speakers from 23 different countries, various Christian churches, and other faiths. The purpose of the conference? To support and reinvigorate the relationship between a man and a woman, marriage, and family life. Archbishop Charles Chaput of Philadelphia and Pastor Rick Warren of Saddleback Church in California will be among the participants. Pope Francis will open the conference and preside over its first meeting. The meeting was proposed last year by Cardinal Gerhard Mueller, the prefect of the Congregation for the Doctrine of the Faith. And according to a close aide of Pope Francis, the controversial paragraph on homosexuality in the midterm synod report was retained in the final document by order of the Pope himself. Cardinal Reinhard Marx, the president of the German Bishops' Conference, told Die Zeit that the paragraph concerning the discussion of appropriate pastoral attention for homosexual persons was kept in the final report, despite the fact that the body voted not to include the passage. According to Cardinal Marx, the Pope wanted everyone in the Church to see where we stood." End quote. The Synod on the Family resumes in October 2015. And another German prelate, Cardinal Walter Kasper, who has championed the controversial effort to allow divorced and remarried Catholics to quickly receive communion, is receiving a theological award from the Catholic University of America here in Washington, D.C. It is the only pontifical university in the U.S. serving primarily lay people. The Cardinal is being honored for excellence in scholarship and leadership in religious studies. You will recall Cardinal Kasper made headlines during the Synod on the Family for his controversial annulment fast pass proposals. His ideas were roundly criticized inside and outside of the Synod Hall, a book-length criticism by 5 other cardinals, including Cardinal Raymond Burke, deconstructed the Kasper plan. We approached Cardinal Kasper for an interview while he was in town, but he declined. In a related story, the bishops of Germany are being criticized for their behavior back at home. Vatican watcher Sandro Magister noted in a column this week that while the German bishops, among them Cardinals Kasper and Marx, are leading the charge to allow Catholics in irregular marriages to receive communion, they are denying the sacraments, even confession, to Catholics who refuse to pay Germany's church tax. The compulsory tax is collected by the government and given to the Church to help run parishes and hospitals and charitable projects. It garners billions in annual revenue. Critics note a bit of hypocrisy on the part of the German bishops and their pay-to-pray system over which they appear to preside. When we return, the Republican Party made historic gains in the midterm elections this week. How will it change the agenda in Washington and around the world? Radio talk show host and Fox News contributor Laura Ingraham is here to give us her take. And Congressman Jim Sensenbrenner will join us as well when the World Over Live continues. Don't touch that dial.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to the World Over Live. This week's midterm election here in the United States saw the Republican Party take back control of the U.S. Senate for the first time in nearly a decade. With control of both houses of Congress, the stage is set for even more clashes between the GOP and President Obama in the waning years of his presidency. Here to break down a few of the key races and issues of the week's election and tell us what it all means is radio talk show host, author, and Fox News contributor, Laura Ingraham.
Hi, Raymond.
Thanks for being here.
Good to see you.
Now, when you look at this election, was this a referendum on Obama and his policies, or was this an affirmative vote for the GOP and their cause?
I think a little bit of both. I mean, this is a total repudiation of lack of economic opportunity for middle America. Open borders has been a disaster for the middle class. Obviously, Ebola, the immigration wave. People are really freaked out. I mean, I called it the fury election. I think there's a lot of fury, a lot of angst, and a lot of heartache in the American landscape. And Obama has been so supremely confident of his policies. He told us stimulus was going to work. Cash for clunkers was going to be great. Obamacare is going to go off and it's going to be fabulous. Everyone's going to like it once they have it. Well, what happened this year is that a lot of the bills came due for a lot of his bad policies. So We did the immigration amnesty deal by executive order a couple of years ago. That little DACA thing is called the Dreamer. And that encouraged the new wave of people coming across, humanitarian concerns, concerns about children. And then, of course, the premiums for Obamacare have now come, mine went up 39%, thank you very much. And it's shocking. A lot of business owners, they don't know how they're going to stay afloat. So all of these realities have now kind of gelled in the American people, and they don't like it. They don't see a way out of this. And the only alternative were the Republicans, right? And the Republicans ran pretty good campaigns. They ran very disciplined campaigns. And now the ball's in their court.
Now, you know what the word is. You saw the cover of the New York Times a few days ago.
Yeah.
It claims Mitch McConnell and a group of establishment Republicans came together and they purged the ranks. They stopped many of these challenges to long-standing senators and congresspeople in the early process. Is that what happened? Was this purifying the herd, if you will? I
think the purge, we saw it in, of course, the Thad Cochran race in Mississippi. What was done to Chris McDaniel was horrible. I mean, if you want to defeat Chris McDaniel, who was the GOP primary challenger, that's fine. But to use like race as they did, race baiting, I mean, Haley Barbour, I mean, this was just a nightmare. So yeah, they wanted to get rid of the undesirables, if you will, and it worked.
Is the message here establishment candidates can win?
Well, we'll see. You can win if you have hundreds of millions of dollars. The question is, was it worth it in a place like Mississippi to spend all of that money? It might have been better, I would submit, to have taken some of that money, used it in New Hampshire to push Scott Brown over the top, or to use it in that governor's race in Connecticut, where we came within, what, 15,000 votes, I think, at last tally. Could have won the governorship there. Other races that we could have won. So, yeah, you spent a lot of money to prop up Thad Cochran and Lamar Alexander. The guys that are in their 70s, God bless them, they're nice people. But maybe it's better to go the route of a Cory Gardner or a Joni Ernst, who are both fresh faces, have a fresh perspective. And, yeah, they're very talented, and they did get the establishment imprimatur. They were good candidates.
I want to talk about the war on women. This was a big part of some major candidacies here. Mark Udall used it in Colorado. 47% of his ads were abortion and contraception related.
What else is he going to campaign on?
Wendy Davis in Texas, she was kind of the poster child for abortion on demand.
Ooh, Wendy.
She went down in flames, as did Sandra Fluke in her little
I didn't even know she was running. That's how bad. Yeah, she went down in flames.
What's the message here? Is that the end of the war on women routine?
The message is, if people don't have jobs, their wages aren't going up year after year after year, and you don't have some incredibly charismatic person on the ticket, it's not going to get you anywhere. I mean, I think that thing has run its course. I mean, if you're a Republican, all you have to say is, okay, a $10 birth control packet or a job. Which one do you want? Because last time I checked, opportunity is what Americans want. The government can only do so much, can't be mommy, can't be daddy, can't be the prescription provider. But we can get out of the way of businesses, and we can make sure that American dreams are achieved first, and that's what we're going to do. I think it's an easy way to defeat that. I think that is really tired. Even the Democrats are saying, well, that didn't work.
The Catholic vote broke, interestingly, in this election. 56% went for the GOP as opposed to 44% for the Democrats.
From 2008, where Catholics really pushed Obama over the top. Also in 2012, Catholics also broke for the Democrats. So, again, you can't have a country that's struggling for this long, 6 years into a presidency, and see a president who appears to be so disconnected, Raymond, from the reality of most people's lives. Not the rich, they're doing great. Look at the markets. It's crazy. The poor, they get some help. The middle, they're suffering. The quotes from people in some of the post-election analysis, I don't know how I'm going to get by. I'm living paycheck to paycheck. I'm really worried about my family. These are the stories of America today. And for politicians to only dance to the tune of the Chamber of Commerce, or only dance to the tune of one special interest group like La Raza or any special interest group, you've got to listen to where the people are. The people want a real future for this country.
There are a lot of pundits, even a lot of Catholics, who keep peddling this idea that there is no Catholic vote. Just ignore it. Don't worry about it. Do you buy that?
I think it's a diverse group of people, obviously, but I think when there's such a concerted effort to undermine religious liberty, and when those issues are discussed in an informative way and an impassionate way, and some of the candidates did talk about the religious liberty issue. I know people like Joni Ernst and Cory Gardner, all these guys, they didn't just talk bread and butter, economic issues. They hit all of these issues. That was very smart. Scott Walker, pro-life.
I was just about to say, when you look at the exit polls, Scott Walker, Susana Martinez, Greg Abbott in Texas,
new governor of Texas.
Hogan in Maryland. These were Catholic voters and evangelicals who really rallied. So much for this canard that the Catholic vote doesn't exist.
So more importantly, Raymond, I think, is so much for the idea that social conservatism should be pushed to the side. Again, we talked about the undesirables. I think there are a lot of people in the Republican Party, maybe the big donor class, they never were quite comfortable with this religious vote. They tolerated it during the Reagan years because they wanted to defeat the Soviet Union. But it's like the ugly stepchildren in the room for a lot of these elites. And I think what we saw is that you have a principled stand. You're a Catholic. You're an evangelical. You stand for your faith proudly. You know, no theocracy, but we're going to stand for our freedom. That's very attractive. I think it's very alluring for voters because they're not hiding who they are. They're proclaiming it and saying, I want to improve our culture, our home life, our families, and our economy. All of it works together in a really powerful way.
For some of these candidates, it was their saving grace.
Big time.
Speaking of saving grace, here's the president at his post-election press conference. He was defiant. He was determined that he would enact immigration reform on his own if necessary, really setting the agenda for the forthcoming Congress. Take a look.
That's a commitment I made not just to the American people, and to businesses and evangelical community and law enforcement folks and everybody who's looked at this issue and thinks that we need immigration reform. That's a commitment that I also made to John Boehner, that I would act in the absence of action by Congress.
He says he has a commitment.
Talk about bravado and a sense of disconnect from the American people. His party just got ground into the dirt in state legislatures, governor's races, Senate, and House. They lost across the board in blue states and red states, Raymond. And he comes out and he said, basically, my policies are affirmed by the American people, and I'm going to go around Congress because I'm, frankly, a spoiled brat. And he was acting, I'm going to say it, I'm a mother of 3 children. He was acting like a spoiled brat at that press conference with a veneer of graciousness. And what I say is that look what happened in Oregon, liberal Oregon. They elected a liberal governor for the 4th term. They passed a pot legalization. And guess what else they decided in a referendum? 2-to-1 margin against driver's licenses for illegal immigrants in Oregon, Raymond. That was the only referendum that dealt with the issue of immigration in the country, as far as I know. And it was an overwhelming no. We can't incentivize people to be here illegally. Again, people have big hearts. We are a nation of immigrants, but they have to follow the law. And this blank check that we're giving to illegal immigrants, I know I'm probably upsetting some people watching, it's bringing down this country. And real people's lives are being devastated. So we can help other countries. We can be very generous. But if we don't get our economic house in order and respect our rule of law, we can't expect anyone else to respect it.
I want to follow up on that in just a moment. This is Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell. He's reacting to the president's suggestion to go it alone on immigration reform. Roll that.
I think the president choosing to do a lot of things unilaterally on immigration would be a big mistake. It's an issue that most of my members want to address legislatively, and it's like waving a red flag in front of a bull to say, if you guys don't do what I want, I'm going to do it on my own.
It seems, if you read in between the lines, Mitch McConnell is saying we should do this legislatively. What's wrong with that? What should their plan be?
Well, Mitch McConnell is going to set up a firestorm in his own party unnecessarily if he thinks the voters went to the voting booth to enact immigration reform with the good faith of Barack Obama involved. People didn't ask for that. People want our laws respected. We want to see credibility on the border, overstays for visas, have that enforced for a number of years.
You still have 12 million people here in the world that you have to do something with.
That's not why the Republicans were elected, to deal with people who are in this country illegally, except to enforce our laws. The idea that this tsunami against the Democrats should compel the Republicans to go toward Obama on this issue? Got to be kidding me. They should go toward where the American people are on this issue. Every poll shows that the American people want to be fair, but the #1 priority on immigration is to enforce this border and to get this visa overstay problem in order. If we don't do that, Raymond, we're going to continue to see a humanitarian crisis, thousands of kids, thousands of families. It hurts them, it endangers them, and it endangers our working people in this country and our rule of law. We can't have it. So the idea that you compromise with Obama on that is a fool's errand, and Obama must be smiling.
Final question. Who were the big winners looking forward to 2016? That's what this is really about. You had all these would-be presidential candidates covering the country. politicking and campaigning for these candidates. Who were the big winners this week, Laura?
Well, I think the consultants and the lobbyists, they always make money no matter who wins, Raymond. They're making big bucks. But other than that, Scott Walker comes out a big winner. Three-term governor in a liberal blue state. He defied the unions, and he's very cheerful and optimistic. I'm keeping a close eye on him. Also, I think, although he was much maligned, Chris Christie from New Jersey, after Bridgegate, they said he was over. Turns out that went nowhere. He went out and raised a boatload of money and campaigned for every governor who was in a tight race, and I think he looks very interesting after this. Some people like John Kasich, important state of Ohio. He's reelected, and he's a very reform-minded Republican. And
what of your friend Hillary Clinton?
I think Hillary's hurt a little bit by this because, look, she and Bill went down to Kentucky. Bill Clinton won there twice. Yep. Went to Arkansas. Meanwhile, Arkansas, we got another senator out of Arkansas, of course, Tom Cotton, great young senator. And also Asa Hutchinson wins the governorship in Arkansas. That hurt. So Hillary and Bill went to both places. And Hillary and Bill also went to Illinois, Raymond, where Pat Quinn went down in flames. And we have a Republican governor, Bruce Rauner, in Illinois, Dartmouth man, I got to say that. And he's a really strong businessman, philanthropist, great guy. I think everywhere Hillary and Bill campaigned in those critical states, they lost.
Before I let you go, I have a little tiny bone to pick.
Okay.
I think when you step back and look at this week, President Obama came out a lot better looking than we imagined because he defiantly stood there, and he is setting the agenda, Laura. The fact that you have Republicans talking about compromising, finding a legislative path to immigration
reform, but you can't make up.
He's setting the agenda.
Listen, the Democrats win. When they win, they move to the left. Now, a lot of people are worried when the Republicans win, they move to the left too. I mean, it's insane. Like they lose and they act like they win. We win and we act like we lose. So you go figure that out. But you got to hand it to him. He has a pair of.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Leave it there.
Yeah.
Thank you, Laura.
Got to make people laugh, at least. Good to see you.
For more on Laura Ingraham, her radio show, columns, and TV appearances, visit her website, lauraingraham.com. For the congressional perspective, I want to go now to a seasoned Congressman, Jim Sensenbrenner. He won his 19th term in the U.S. House with nearly 70% of the vote. To start the conversation, here is President Obama reacting to the Republican control of the House and Senate. Watch this.
To everyone who voted, I want you to know that I hear you. To the 2/3 of voters who chose not to participate in the process yesterday, I hear you too. All of us have to give more Americans a reason to feel like the ground is stable beneath their feet, that the future is secure, that there's a path for young people to succeed, and that folks here in Washington are concerned about them.
Congressman Jim Sensenbrenner, your reaction to that. The president says he represents 2/3 of Americans. You only represent the 1/3 that just voted.
No, I don't represent the 1/3 that just voted. In my county, 80% of the people voted. That's because we decided we were going to get every Republican to go to the polls. It worked. Scott Walker won. I won. We gained Republicans in the legislature. We elected a Republican Attorney General. That's because the people who went out to vote cared to vote to send a message in terms of the type of changes that Governor Walker has led the fight for under great odds and at great personal sacrifice, and they wanted him back.
And what's the national message here? What's your takeaway? What are you hearing from the electorate?
Well, what I'm hearing from the electorate is good thing the Republicans got control of the Senate so that Harry Reid isn't throwing good legislation into the wastebasket or forgetting about it. We want to have a good budget. We want to deal with energy so that we can become energy independent, starting with the Keystone XL pipeline. We want to see a rollback on wasteful spending, and we want to see states empowered. That's what Republicans have run on. That's what Republicans are going to do. And if the president decides to get his veto pen out, then he's going to have to be the one who explains why he's obstructing government.
Now, the president, as we were talking with Laura Ingraham a moment ago, the president is willing to go it alone. In fact, he's defying the Republican Congress and saying, look, I'm going to move and pass some kind of immigration reform using my executive pen, with or without you. Your reaction to that?
The Constitution has separation of powers, and one of the provisions in the Constitution is that immigration and naturalization are the prerogative of the Congress. the president, in terms of some energy and climate change stuff, has basically picked up things that were rejected even by the Pelosi-Reed Congress of 09 and 10. And the president had better realize that one of the reasons why the people spoke the way they did was because they were opposed to executive amnesty. And if the president decides to do that one way or the other, I think he's going to paint himself into a further public relations corner.
I want to roll this by. This is your speaker, John Boehner, reacting to the president's suggestion that he will unilaterally move on immigration reform. Listen.
But I've made clear to the president that if he acts unilaterally on his own, outside of his authority, he will poison the well, and there will be no chance for immigration reform moving in this Congress. When you play with matches, you take the risk of burning yourself. And he's going to burn himself if he continues to go down this path.
Congressman Sensenbrenner, there has been talk of impeachment if the president moves in this direction. Do you see an impeachable offense here if the president were to move unilaterally on immigration reform?
Well, it's hard to say. I gave the opening argument in the Clinton impeachment, and we don't have 2/3 of the Senate, and the president will end up staying in office because all the Democrats will completely ignore the fact that the presidential oath requires him to faithfully execute the laws. Laws are passed by Congress on that. I think that people will view this as an overreach by the White House, just as he's overreached on a lot of EPA regulations, and his approval rating will take another nosedive.
What is in your arsenal? What can you do if the president says, here's the executive order, we will stop deportations, we're going to find a way to bring relatives of the people who are here, bring them in, put them in a queue, and give them all citizenship in time?
Well, first of all, the president can't sign an executive order granting anybody citizenship. That's clearly unconstitutional. Where the president has got a problem is that if he legalizes millions of undocumented people who probably would go into low-skilled and labor-intensive parts of the economy, he basically takes jobs away from African Americans. That's going to be a problem that he has to deal with. And you have two groups in the Democratic coalition, the African Americans on one side and the Hispanics on the other, who there's no way that doing this can please them both. Now, what we need to do, number one, I think, is enforce the laws we already have. Number two, we shouldn't turn our backs on legal immigration. But if legal immigrants and illegal immigrants are treated the same way, we will slowly close the door to legal immigration, which would be a terrible tragedy for our country. We do need to secure the border, and I think that the president, in allowing these kids from Central America to jump the fence by the thousands, basically has made it difficult to pass any type of immigration reform bill for the next several years.
As you know, the bishops of the United States, the Catholic Church of which you are now a member,
yes,
these leaders are saying we should have comprehensive immigration reform, and there should be some sort of welcome to the people that are here. You would say what to them?
Well, I would say, first of all, I was taught it was a sin to break the law, and they are breaking the law. So what part of illegal don't they understand? They would come back to me quoting Matthew 25, where the Lord says to welcome the stranger. I believe in welcoming the stranger. That's the stranger who knocks on the door, not the stranger who breaks into your house.
Okay. Let's move on to what would a GOP plan look like if you had to draft it? Because we are hearing in the winds here that a GOP immigration plan has to be drafted, is in the works. Would it be mostly enforcement and what you just said, observing the law?
Well, there are several things that we have to do relative to enforcement. You know, one is to secure the border. Secondly, the GOP, I think, will push allowing state and local law enforcement to enforce the immigration law, which is not done in most cases now. The third thing I think that we need to do is to look at areas where we have real problems in our economy and have a temporary visa program for people in agriculture, and temporary means temporary, meaning you go home when you're supposed to. And we need to deal with high-tech visas because it doesn't make any sense to educate high-tech people from abroad and not have the visas for them to work helping us grow our economy, and instead sending them home so that they will compete with us. That doesn't make any sense.
Congressman Sensenbrenner, I want to move on to Obamacare. This was a part of so many of these races across the country. So many of the GOP candidates raised this. It obviously resonated with voters. Do you have a mandate to repeal or adapt parts of Obamacare, fix the problems?
Well, I don't think Obamacare can be fixed. I think we've got to repeal it and start over. Now, there are some parts of Obamacare that I think are very worthwhile. For example, getting rid of pre-existing conditions exclusions. I think if we had a vote up or down on that, it would pass unanimously with everybody, Republicans and Democrats, voting for it. Where the sticky parts of Obamacare are the employer mandate, which kicks in, the individual mandate that kicks in, and runaway insurance premiums. Because after all, Obama, and one of his many promises that were broken, did say that the average reduction in premiums would be $2,500. And there are not going to be very many people that come even close to that. Most of the people will have increases in their premiums.
So what do you do? What are you going to do? I mean, Congressman Boehner has already said, we plan on moving a repeal bill.
I support that.
You think it'll get through the Senate?
Well, if it's part of a reconciliation bill which only needs 51 votes and can't be filibustered, yes. And there'll be a lot of other things that would be in that reconciliation bill that are very, very attractive, such as an overhaul of the tax code where the top marginal rate would go down and a lot of special interest exclusions and deductions would become history.
Let's talk about the budget and NSA, which I know are two issues very near and dear to your heart, being the author, really, of the Patriot Act in large part. What is your vision in those two areas?
Well, first of all, in the budget, we have to pass a budget that gets to a balanced budget within 10 years. I'd like to see it done sooner, but it is going to...
How about 5?
Well, okay, yeah. Well, and how about 2? You know, we'll have a betting contest.
I'm with you.
But it's going to have to require changes in entitlement programs. And we haven't had the budget reform that we've needed because the Democrats have stuck by saying we shouldn't have any changes in entitlement programs at all. Well, Social Security will run out of money by 2033, and the sooner we deal with how to fix Social Security, the fewer people are going to get hurt. And Republicans have proposed in Paul Ryan's budget that we not affect anybody's Social Security if they're older than age 55, but we've got to figure out better ways for people who are under 55 to have more money paid on their tax dollars through various kinds of self-directed investments, just like we do with IRAs. But that's not a privatization. What should we do with the NSA and its surveillance? Well, we've got to get rid of bulk collection on Americans to begin with. The Freedom Act, which I sponsored and which the House passed by an over a 3-to-1 margin, is currently pending in the Senate. We do need to have some surveillance, but targeted on people who would do us harm. And there, the administration and the intelligence community can go and get a warrant saying Mr. X or Miss X we know is plotting to do us harm. We would like to get all the records and find out who they're talking to. That's something that we ought to do to protect Americans. But to say that every phone call and every text and every email that is made by an American ends up going into a government storage bin to be retrieved whenever they want to is not in the American interest, and I think it is not consistent with the Fourth Amendment against unreasonable searches and seizures.
Yeah. I want to move to the personal, if you'll permit me for a moment.
Of course.
Okay. There was a big story in August where you converted to the Catholic faith. Now, every time I'd met you before this, you described yourself as an Anglican Catholic, and you have been a faithful Anglican for a long time. What brought you over?
Well, I would say the Holy Spirit did, with a slight push from Cardinal Dolan.
Yeah, I heard that. And there was a crisis in your own family and in your life.
Well, the day before Mother's Day, I found my wife unconscious on the floor of our house, and she had suffered a brain aneurysm. When she got to the hospital and the doctors did the CAT scan, they said that she only had a 3% chance of survival. Wow. Well, somehow Cardinal Dolan, heard that I was, having both a spiritual crisis as well as a physical crisis in my family, and he was kind enough to spend some time having a couple of pastoral calls with me. Now, I got to know Cardinal Dolan very well when he was the Archbishop of Milwaukee. I think he's a very patient man because he'd been working on me for about 12 years.
Well, it took him a long time, but we're glad you're finally in the fold.
Well, thank you.
Congressman Sensenbrenner. Thank you for being here. We will be in touch in the coming days.
Absolutely.
Thank you.
Thanks.
When we return, the heartbreaking case of 29-year-old Brittany Maynard. She took her life last week using Oregon's so-called death with dignity law. How has her case changed the debate about physician-assisted suicide? Father Tad Pacholczyk of the National Catholic Bioethics Center will give us his take when The World Over returns. Stay right there. Thank you.
Now, once again, Raymond Arroyo.
Welcome back to The World Over Live. The story of a 29-year-old Oregon woman who took her life following a terminal diagnosis garnered international headlines. Now, some say Brittany Maynard's suicide has reframed the right to die debate and given euthanasia advocates new momentum. The Vatican this week called her suicide a tragic symbol of the culture of death. Here to discuss the story and give us his perspective as a neuroscientist, a priest, and an ethicist, please welcome back to the program the Director of Education of the National Catholic Bioethics Center, Father Tad Pacholczyk. Father Tad, welcome back.
Thank you. Great to be with you.
Now, does this reframe this right to die debate, in your opinion?
Well,
seeing a young person die?
I think it does. I think it appeals to people in the younger crowd. It makes it an issue of relevance to them because so often they push death at a distance and don't want to get into it too much. You know, this was trending really big on places like Facebook, and so I think it has garnered a lot of attention among a crowd that normally wouldn't pay much attention.
I want to play a little bite here because just to acquaint people with the stakes, there are right to die initiatives, laws now moving forward in New Jersey, Wyoming, Connecticut, and other states. But they're actually moving through the legislatures now. I want to play you this bite. This is Brittany Maynard talking to CBS's Jan Crawford.
So to the people who would say, well, you're choosing to end your life, that's suicide, you would say, no, it's what?
Cancer is ending my life. I am choosing to end it a little sooner and in a lot less pain and suffering.
That argument appeals to an awful lot of people. Cancer is ending her life, she said.
Well, it does appeal to people, but the question is whether what she's saying is true. It's clear that she is taking initiative on her own to bring her life to a close, and to say that that's not suicide, to suggest that it is really the cancer that's taking her when she's actively intervening by swallowing barbiturates, it simply doesn't stand the test of accuracy here.
She makes the other point, I've been reading a lot of commentary on this case, and they all, to a person, chaplains and ethicists, they all say, look, she's sparing her family suffering. She said that elsewhere, that this is to spare her family a prolonged death.
Well, and certainly the intention is understandable as good. Nobody likes to see a family member suffer. And there's, you know, an element of generosity perhaps written into what she's trying to do, but the question of how she's going about it, and really whether she's going to actually achieve the end here. Because you remember Victoria Kennedy, she wrote an editorial about Ted Kennedy's cancer, which it turns out was the same kind of cancer that Brittany had. And she said, you know, they diagnosed him as having 2 to 4 months left. We got 15 months of wonderful time with him. So you think, you know, Brittany, if she hadn't done that, how much time, how much blessing could she have brought to her family? She's saying she wanted to spare them suffering. Well, that's understandable. But I think some great graces here were short-circuited and many opportunities lost.
There's also no talk of palliative care, as if people are just left to suffer from cancer and, you know, we'll watch them ravaged and they're just going to be screaming out in pain. There is palliative care.
There is palliative care, and I think that her physicians really didn't do her much of a service by painting her time as being so short, 6 months, and painting a death for her that really frightened her. I think she was driven by fear here a great deal, and the palliative care side was not shared with her. Palliative care these days is getting better and better all the time.
And this is the pain relief.
Pain relief, pain management, and also, you know, addressing symptoms in general that arise as people die.
I want to raise a few issues. The Washington Post, in an editorial, said she died in a philosophically responsible way. She spared her family a drawn-out death. What's wrong with that?
Well, I think the issue here, you know, philosophically responsible. Is it philosophically responsible for us to treat something good, like the gift of our life, as if it were an evil to be extinguished? It's not. Philosophically,
the throwaway culture, the book talks about this.
Right, exactly.
Throwaway mentality.
Here we're in a situation where, I mean, as in so many things in life, we have to be careful that we don't choose disordered or evil means to pursue certain ends.
The New York Times, in the New York Times, an NYU bioethicist, Arthur Kaplan, wrote, "This is an ethical choice that Brittany made. She, not her doctors, took her life." Do you believe that?
She, not her doctors, that's true, because she ended up swallowing the pills on her own.
She couldn't have gotten the pills without the doctors.
Exactly.
So
the doctors cooperated in evil. Absolutely. They were cooperators in a fundamental way. And also those who pass the laws in places like Oregon that allow for this, they cooperate in very, very serious evils.
But it's very interesting the way people are reframing this. And Dr. Kaplan and others have said this is changing the optics of this debate.
Well, in some respects, as we said at the opener, among a younger crowd, I think it is. I don't think overall it is. As people reflect on this, they really don't feel that this was a good thing. There's a lot of pushback that one is registering as people reflect on it. This was a young, vibrant woman. When you're younger and you have a terminal illness, you have more resources to mount a battle, to continue. And so there's really something very, very tragic here, and I think people are becoming honest about this and saying this wasn't a good thing in the final analysis.
Is really the, I mean, I guess the big issue here was really a young person facing death and making this choice. And aside from that, there's really little new here.
Right, because I mean, in Oregon, if you look at the statistics, it has been older people who have typically availed themselves of this law. Right. So Brittany was, I think, one of only 4 or 5, maybe 6 people maximum who had done this.
You had a chaplain at Pacific University who wrote a piece, and he said this was a moral choice. So you have religious leaders and chaplains and clergy from other denominations, obviously, getting involved and saying, there's no problem here. It's moral to spare people suffering.
Well, the suffering piece plays big, but I mean, Raymond, I think the question here really is, how do we responsibly approach suffering as humans when it comes to us? Simple example, you're a kid, 10 years old, and you see your doctor coming at you to give you a vaccination with a needle. Now, you can react to the suffering that you know is coming with tremendous fear, maybe hysteria, go crazy. But if your mom and dad say to you, no, look, if you take that needle and don't get all worked up, it's going to be for the good of your future health. You can, in a sense, redirect your focus to greater goods that lie beyond that needle. Same thing with Brittany. She had suffering that was put in front of her. She allowed the fear to recast her whole direction and tragically led her in a direction than to do something that was really harmful.
She was involved with this advocacy group, Compassion and Choices.
The former Hemlock Society.
Oh, is that what it was?
Yes,
the former
Hemlock Society.
Very interesting. Do you have a problem with the politicization of this woman's case? And I mean, obviously, she was party to it.
She was party, and I think she even, in a sense, went out to them to try to, avail herself, give her services to them. But I do think it's tragic. I think it was a very well orchestrated, very successful PR campaign, and I think that, when you went to the website of Compassion and Choices, there wasn't, for example, any way to contact Brittany herself and say, Brittany, would you reconsider? Instead, they had on the website, oh, write a little note of support to Brittany. So it was very obviously crafted, manipulative in many ways, and I think it was politicized in a direction that's really unfortunate.
There were a number of people who responded. A woman with cancer posted her own YouTube, terminal cancer, her own YouTube video. I read a seminarian who was similarly ill who said, no, there's a beauty in this. If you spend the time and go through the suffering, there may be gifts for others as well as yourself.
Yes, I think the fact that we die in a context, in a setting, connected to other people, there's a whole process here that's sacred. And there's so many things that can happen that we don't even expect. There can be forgiveness, there can be healing. There may be, for example, family members who haven't spoken to each other for 20 years. Yeah. Somebody's dying, they come bedside, they speak to each other for the first time in 2 decades. That's significant. And if we short-circuit that through physician-assisted suicide, many graces are lost here. A real tragedy, I'm convinced.
It's an important point to raise as we think about, and none of us like to think about it, but perhaps we should, preparing for the end of life. And there's a lot of information out there. One doesn't know quite what to follow. Should you get a proxy? Should you get one of these physician directives? Your thoughts on that?
The best approach here, Raymond, is to have a proxy. This is somebody that you choose, that's close to you, somebody that loves you, somebody that you've spoken with about your wishes.
You give them durable power of attorney?
Yes. They become the individuals who, if you become unconscious, they will talk to the doctors, talk to the nurses, 2 feet on the ground, make some assessments real time that correspond to your needs and to your wishes. Very sensible way to go about it. Meanwhile,
not a physician order of life-sustaining treatment or a living will.
No, because those kinds of things, the living wills, the pulsed forms, as they're called, physician orders, these are filled out way ahead of time. Sometimes they're just check boxes that are very, very general, and they may not correspond at all to what actually happens to you later when you find yourself in a situation, a life-ending situation.
Sure, and you never know. Life moves, it shifts, it changes,
quickly,
there are new possibilities.
And you don't know what it is that you're going to die from. So to do these things in a kind of predictive way ahead of time is unrealistic.
Before we run out of time, I want to hit some things in the news. We are seeing amazing new technologies. Breast milk being used to extract stem cells. Tell us about this.
Yes,
what's happened.
This is an amazing development. They've actually done this mostly in mice, but they're looking to check it out also in humans. In mice, they can prove that there is a transfer of stem cells from mother to child during lactation, during the transfer of that breast milk, and that these stem cells, they stably become incorporated later into organs of the baby, of the child. And this is very similar to earlier studies that showed that simply growing in utero, there are few stem cells that sneak across the placenta and get inside the child, and vice versa, from the child back to the mother. So we carry pieces of our mother with us as we grow up, and she carries pieces of us, so to speak. So we're connected even in life.
Amazing. There was another story about a Polish man paralyzed who is injected in his spine?
Yes.
Or around the spine? Tell us about this.
This used cells out of his nose.
Adult stem cells.
Adult stem cells and some other cells that are involved in putting coats onto nerves. And this helped bridge the damage site. He had been stabbed in the spinal cord, became paralyzed, and he was able to actually regain the ability to move his limbs, his lower limbs. Wow. So incredible development. This had also been done in Portugal earlier, so it's kind of continuing the same line of work, an exciting development.
Before I let you go, there were some ballot initiatives this week. Pot use was legalized. Oregon, Washington, D.C. We are seeing new reports now about the detrimental effects of pot on the mind. There was a piece in the New York Times. There was an article I know you wrote recently. Tell us about it. What are the studies and the data telling us?
Well, the data are telling us that there is a real risk of addiction. About 9% of those people who experiment with pot will become addicted. So think what this means, Raymond. You legalize it in a state, you expand the availability, and 9% of all the people who then try it new risk of addiction. There's also very good statistics indicating an increased amount of fatal and non-fatal car accidents from people who use pot. And finally, perhaps the most scary one is that there is long-term impairment of learning ability. Students show reduced performance as they go through school if they have used pot. And these kinds of effects have been very well documented, statistically significant. We need to warn people. And actually, it's funny because in Colorado, they have now taken some of the money from making pot legal to educate people about these untoward effects.
Well, I mean, when the New York Times is reporting that the brain is actually different from pot users as opposed to non-smokers, you got to look at this stuff
Absolutely.
twice.
Certain regions shrink. The amygdala is one region. It's a frightening thing. These are permanent changes if one continues to use pot for an extended period.
Father Tad Pacholczzyk, thank you for being here.
Great to be with you, Raymond.
Pleasure to see you. For more on Father Tad's work and all of his columns, visit the National Catholic Bioethics Center website at ncbcenter.org. Until next week, the show continues on Facebook and Twitter. Like me on Facebook, follow me on Twitter. Let me know what you think of tonight's show. Also, sign up for my free e-blast at RaymondArroyo.com. I will send you some great links and some big news before I announce it on air. Do not miss next week's show. My new exclusive interview with author Dean Koontz. He'll be talking about his latest thriller, The City, and much more. In the meantime, we'll be scouting the world over for all that is seen and unseen. On behalf of the staff and crew of EWTN News, thank you for watching. I'm Raymond Arroyo from Washington, D.C. We'll see you next time. Bye now.